Ladies and gentlemen, I am convening the April 2021 Marine Fish Advisory Commission business meeting. And I'm going to move right into the review and approval of the April 15th business meeting agenda. Need a motion.
Your commission member, please raise your hand if you'd like to make the motion. I have a motion from Mike Peerdock.
Thank you, Michael. I need a second.
I have a second from Shelley Edmondson.
Thank you, Shelley. Although, does anybody object? Any objections, Jared?
I'm not seeing any objections, Raymond. The April business meeting passes unanimously.
Moving along, review and approval of the March 18th draft business meeting minutes.
Comments? I'm not seeing any commission members with comments, Mr. Chair. We can move to a motion.
Yes. Need a motion.
Mike Peerdock.
Thank you, Michael. I need a second.
I second. Amaru.
Bill Amaru.
Thank you, Bill. Does anybody object?
No objections.
So moved. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for your attendance. I know we've got one commission member. He's in traffic right now, so he's listening in on the phone, and hopefully we pick up the other two members, or I think we have 6, you said, Jared, plus Bill Doyle, who was caught in traffic listening on the phone.
We have 8 of 9 now.
We have 8 of 9. Very good. I'm going to turn this over to Commissioner Ron Amidon, and I want to thank everybody for their attendance. Commissioner Amidon.
Good morning, Chairman Kane. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm glad to see the board members actively participating as they always do. I don't have a lot for you today, other than I'd like to report that currently through the budget process, things seem to be going pretty smoothly. House Ways and Means has been pretty good to us. We're either level funded across the board or a little bump up here and there. So nothing to complain about there for sure. And then I'd like to let everyone know that next week being Earth Week, we're going to be celebrating with several of our divisions within department. And Marine Fisheries has arranged for an event on Wednesday, April 21st or 22nd. Dan might have a better window on that for us by now. It'll be at the Herringbrook Park off of Broad Street in Weymouth. And the River Herring Run there is one of the largest in the region. And the Broad Street Bridge Fishway is a popular viewing spot. So we expect to have a good cast of folks on from DMF that day explaining the importance of that fishway. And anyone who can make that, I guarantee it's an impressive sight to be seen. And that is it for my comments, sir, unless you have questions.
So, Ron, the entire commission's invited to that, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Oh, great. And I'm sure Dan will make the announcement or let us know.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
It's an outdoor event, so social distancing and masks are easy to do. And I've been there with DMF in the past and absolutely amazed at the amount of fish that run through there.
Yes, hopefully someday all our herring runs will look similar to that one.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Moving on, Director Dan McKiernan.
Thank you, Raymond. I just have a few items here this morning. I'll be brief. First, I will send, after the meeting's over, the invite to that herring event that Ron had mentioned. I'll send that to all of you by email. As far as 2 items I just want to touch on briefly. The first is CARES 2.0. That refers to the second iteration of federal relief that has been approved by Congress. It was actually approved back in December and hasn't been communicated to us until about 2 or 3 weeks ago through the Asmfc, when the National Marine Fisheries Service finally announced that the amounts that were being awarded to each state. And the total award is a little smaller for us states because they took some money off the top for Great Lakes states and for tribes. But we still are looking at a substantial amount of money, around 23 million, which is a little bit lower than the 28 million we had in the first round. The rules are the same. There's a mandatory 35% loss in order to be qualified for this as a result of COVID and the concept of not to be made more than whole with the COVID relief funds. So in future applications, the applicants will have to list what funds they got from the first round of CARES relief and some other federal programs as well. This is a work in progress. DMF is reconvening its 4 industry advisory groups. These 4 industry groups created filters and scalers, we call them. In other words, creating or recommending criteria that we adopted in our spending plan, which created a filter, which made an individual eligible or not, and scalers where the payment was scaled according to criteria, and that varied across the 4 sectors. And those 4 sectors are commercial fishing, seafood processing, and wholesale dealing as another sector. And then the third is aquaculture. And then the fourth is for hire, the party and charter boats. So the groups are convening as soon as, I think this afternoon is the first meeting, and over the next week, each of the groups will be convened. We anticipate putting together the recommendations from these groups and eventually submitting another spending plan to the National Fisheries Service, I hope within a month. Or I don't know if Kevin's on the line, if a month is too optimistic, but we don't think it will be able to cut checks until the summer, of course. But the sooner we get to it, the better off everyone will be. And of course, we were the first in the country to release its money, the state money, last time around. So we hope to be able to do the same. So
she's got enough samples of the stock stuff, everything that's in the
Hey, Bill Doyle, can you mute? Okay, my second issue is the MSI Mass Shellfish Initiative completed its strategic plan on a webinar about 2 weeks ago. It was completed. It took us over 2 years, and there's a May 4th press event scheduled. One of the key recommendations that's coming out of this is a kind of a formal adoption of the Shellfish Advisory Panel. This is a panel that I created about 7 years ago under Paul Diodati, and it was informal, it was ad hoc, but the plan is to have legislation filed where this panel actually has named members, not named personally, but identifies members such as so many commercial fishermen, so many seafood dealers, folks like that. And it's similar to the group that we have now, but it would be more formal in that it would be codified. And secondly, it would call for at least 2 meetings a year. It's analogous in my mind to the Recreational Development Panel, which oversees our permit revenues for the recreational fishing license and how that's spent. It is advisory only, but it is a great forum to bring people together. And Shellfish really needs that because at the commercial end, all the shellfishing is, or for most of the well-known species, such as softshell clams and quahogs and bay scallops, that's all managed municipally. And in most cases, you have to be a town resident to participate in the commercial fishery in that town. And so while that's great, it's historic, it's traditional, and it's not something we necessarily want to change. It does not lend itself to sort of broad consensus positions on some of the issues that affect shellfish. So what are those? Those are our regulations on on aquaculture, like Vibrio plans. Those could be trying to get, grant money that might do some research on issues that could affect shellfish statewide. So these are important things to come together. And of course, shellfish is a complicated issue because our program has to answer to the Food and Drug Administration. We also co-manage a lot of issues like the dealer issues with the Department of Public Health. So whoever's running Shellfish, and today that's Jeff Kennedy, he has to do a lot of communications with other agencies in order to get his job done every day. And this group would bring those entities together in the presence of some stakeholders a couple of times a year. And I just think that's really healthy to create that kind of a forum going forward and to sort of talk about emerging issues. And if there is legislation that's needed or regulation, of course, if it's regulation, we can do it as an agency. But if it's legislation, I think the legislature would appreciate hearing from this group because it will be a well-constructed group with good representation. And, we'll have the time to invest to come up with, sound assessments or strategies or whatever the problem is. So anyway, I just want to bring that to your attention. I will send you the May 4th announcement for the press conference, so to speak. And we've been getting some assistance from the team over at the Nature Conservancy and their public relations department, and they're really doing a great job helping us put out some information on this event. So that's all I have, Ray. I'll stop there. I'll take any questions.
Questions for the director?
Ducky?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Thanks, Ray. Morning, Dan. Hey, Dan, when you say made whole, as far as the CARE Act goes, does that mean if a percentage of your the money that you might get this time around will put you over, you only get that percentage? Either you go over or you're not over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Kevin to help me out with this, but I believe the answer is yes. So if because the year has come to a close, and your revenues, for the year are known now, right, as opposed to projected in the last time, then it would result in situations where an individual couldn't accept the full share of whatever payment they'd be eligible for. So they would probably be accepting a smaller share based on the math that they submit to us. Kevin, is that accurate?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And yeah, so we already had a few people return money to us from round one now that they're doing taxes. But we are going to have a formula built right into the application that will be pretty straightforward.
And one other thing I'll add, Suki, is that what's important is that we identify what sources of funds have to be put into the addition for revenues last year. So in other words, what are the COVID-related funds a fisherman might have received that he'd have to concede or to reveal to us? What wouldn't have to be included is the USDA tariff relief, because that wasn't COVID related, that was tariff related. But on the aquaculture side, the USDA payments that were made to the shellfish growers, I believe it was 10% of their earnings last year or the previous year, the aquaculturists were eligible for. I believe that would have to be. And of course, some sectors took a much deeper hit last year than others based on the statistics. We understand that everybody's business is unique, but when you look at the data across sectors, we still believe the for-hire and the aquaculturists probably on a aggregate basis, there were more people that took hits, and maybe the hits were deeper. We're looking at some of the commercial data as well to try to learn about that, because like I said before, we have filters and scalers, but now we can reveal to the committees what effect did those filters and scales have on the ability of somebody to get a payment. So it'll be important for us to talk that through with the advisory groups that we convene.
Okay, great, thanks.
I have a question for you, Dan. As far as check dispersal, those checks will be cut by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission?
Yes.
Isn't that the?
Yes,
Okay.
that's same arrangement as last time.
Yeah, to relieve Kevin Creighton's department of that burden.
Well, not just burden to Kevin, but time as well. So if everyone has to be made a vendor, that's just an extra round of paperwork and another thing that can go wrong. Whereas we gave the Asmfc a list of recipients and their bank, and they were mailed a check. So that worked out well.
Yeah, you're coming in and then you're fading. So I don't know if it's your microphone or.
Oh, okay.
There you go. That's much better.
Okay.
Any other questions for the director on this?
Not seeing any questions, Mr. Chair.
Seeing none. Dan? Have you got?
That's all I got, Ray. Turn it over to Matt Bass, I guess, or Pat Moran.
Okay, who's on from law enforcement? Who's going to
Yes.
speak on behalf of law enforcement?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's Matt Bass. And I can be also exceptionally brief here. I think not much has changed in the last month. Still continuing to deal with some of those the protected species issues, but that I think is coming up later in the agenda. It's definitely a sign of spring, as mentioned. The herring are in, also elvers. At the same time, keeping us a little bit busy. There's probably a multitude of smaller issues. I don't think any of which really make the radar, but if it's an issue for anybody, or if there's something I'm missing, or somebody has a question about something specific, I'd more than happy to answer that, but I don't think I have any further comments.
Any questions for Lieutenant Bass?
Suki?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Lieutenant Bass, what's being done about the speeding boats in Cape Cod Bay? We know the AIS information is being passed around to you guys and the Coast Guard, but seems to be a lot of speeding vessels in Cape Cod Bay. I'm not sure if you guys are working with the Coast Guard or what, but what's being done about it? Thanks.
Yeah, so there's a couple issues. So still, it seems a little bit of a learning curve. We have been doing some, we call them, it's basically saturation patrol might be the wrong word, but operational plans. We're out there, on a busier day for wreck traffic. But yeah, I think there's been a couple of boats that are on AIS that specifically a Hui boat that I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. There's the federal regulations and now the state regulations. The state regulations capture all vessels, no matter what their size, with very limited exemptions. And the variety of captains on that boat, we're not going to have any more issues with the specific boat I'm talking about now. But we're answering and calling those complaints that we understand this fishermen are watching AIS, and we're getting those calls and dealing with them as best we can.
Okay, I just, the lobster industry has been hit hard this year because of the right whale issues. And if you want to look at the data, there's 2 baby right whales been killed this year so far, and both of them been ship strikes, and maybe one of them was by a sport fishing boat. You don't hear much about it, but the hammer doesn't seem to fall on the boat speeding around Cape Cod Bay with all the right whales in there, like it falls on the head of the fishermen. So I just wondering what's being done about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Suki. Any other questions for Lieutenant Bass?
Not seeing any further questions, Mr. Chair.
Lieutenant Bass, have you heard of any violators or poachers with glassy eels so far this season?
There are some, I guess I got to say yes and no, but I can't go much farther. We have seen some activity. I think the price in Maine is topped greater than $2,000, and some of their quotas have been met. So we're kind of anticipating that if they can't fish up there, they might come down here, as there's still a demand. But we are seeing some activity, and we're again, trying to deal with that.
So in other words, you have an ongoing investigation that you can't, I was just curious as to if you have seen any movement, for poaching the glass eels. Thank you very much.
Yep. Yeah.
Any other
Sorry. Yeah. So
questions for Lieutenant Bass? Lieutenant Bass, you're breaking
yeah. No.
up.
Sorry. We haven't actually arrested or cited anybody ourselves, I think, but we are seeing the activity, and we know it's ongoing, and following up on that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Lieutenant Bass?
I'm not seeing any further questions.
Thank you, Jared. Moving on to action items. We've got a number of action items today, gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, so let's move right along here. The first one is the commercial striped bass season and open fishing days. And Dan, you want to make your recommendation?
Sure, Ray. Thanks. I think Jared has a slide to put up. But what I'd like to, while he's going to put up that slide, let me just talk this through a little bit. I hope you've had a chance to read the memo that we've put together. It's 9 pages of text plus the draft regs, and of course there are a ton of letters as well. And I just want to kind of go over a little thumbnail sketch of what we're thinking here. As the memo notes, the historic management of this fishery was sort of well established with a lot of industry input, and that input included some on the rec side as well. Under Paul Diodati, there was a number of striped bass advisory panel meetings. This was a group similar to what I talked about earlier about shellfish, but Paul convened these on a regular basis to get some consensus positions, and also to get a good conversation going with among stakeholders, including the dealers, because when it comes to the commercial fishery, it's important to sort of maximize revenues if you can, because we were going in another direction. A decade ago, we were filling this quota in as little as 3 or 4 weeks, and it was disappointing the dealers, the customers, and of course the price per pound was probably half of what it wound up being when we managed it a little smarter by reducing the supply or evening out the supply over a longer time period. So the 3 goals, and the memo captures this, our 3 goals in the past have been to optimize economics for the commercial sector, to improve enforcement, and to reduce user conflicts. And I think we've succeeded. And if you read the memo, you see the litany of all these striped bass commercial changes that we've taken. But in the meantime, we've also had a decline in the overall striped bass stock, and that is attributable to weaker year classes and the management plan at the interstate level maybe not catching up with those weaker year classes, slightly higher than what should have been fishing mortality on both sides, and so we have this situation now where the rules that were written for the time period a decade ago are really not appropriate today if our goal is to utilize the quota. And I would argue that should be our goal, is to fully utilize the quota that we've been given. And so, just brief thumbnail. What have we done to constrain the catch? We went from a situation where commercial permit holders could have 95 fish a week down to 30 for those using boats. For those who are fishing from shore, they would just be limited to 4 fish a week. We took sail away from the charter boats. We kicked the commercial anglers off the banks of the canal. We created a February 28th deadline for you to get a permit. And of course, last year, we added another inch to the minimum size, all in the attempt to separate the sectors in many ways, which I point out in the memo, is designed to improve the recreational fishing experience. You know, I've talked to commission members. I've listened carefully to the testimony, and I've read the letters carefully. And I do have a concern about the impacts of the commercial fishery on the recreational fishery and the recreational experience. But I'm also proud of all of the rules that we've enacted to date. And I think that that we should, stay the course on these, but at the same time, we should make some minor adjustments so that we can get full utilization. The memo describes how striped bass have appeared to be moving or more available, at least they have been last year and the year before, possibly. North of Boston, the Cape fishery was not very productive last year. And if you look at the way the fishery is conducted, Cape Cod and the area down in the South Coast area, having incredible boat ramps and opportunities for commercial anglers to get out and to find these fish. So we have a motion before you that has really three components. One is the earlier opening. A second is during the open season, how many days per week and which days would we like to operate? And finally, what do we want to do in the fall? Should the fishery still be open regarding safety issues? And so I'm recommending a 1 week earlier opening. I'm recommending 3 days, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, which is, in essence, I'm making the argument here to you as a commission that I think you should consider the status quo, because that's where we ended up last year. Last year, we opened with 2 days a week with the expectation that we would liberalize things, mid-season. If we found that the catch rates were low, they were. I came to you, asked for 4 days, you gave me 3. And so I would suggest to you that if with that mindset, let's go back to that 3 days a week and let's make them consecutive, which means the boats or the operators don't have to race in by 10 o'clock and meet the truck. This gives them a chance to fish overnight. And so I think it'll increase the efficiency. And then in the fall, I'm proposing, instead of a more liberal, allowance, but I'm proposing just come October 1st, go to 5 days a week. So this is consistent with sort of preserving weekend fishing for the recreational sector. And during the season, especially before October 1st, the majority of days will be recreational days, and the commercial sector won't be operating. So that is my recommendation. I know there's a lot of opinions about the various options. I think one of the more controversial ones is that earlier opening in the first week of June. I'm sorry, the third week of June, opening up on the 16th. But I believe that as water's warm and things are changing with a lot of our stocks, it's probably likely that these fish are going to be showing up earlier. It's mentioned in the memo, we have some early returns on river herring this year. So even though we're in kind of a cool stretch of weather, if things flip, we do expect fish to show up on the early side. But regardless, I don't think that 1 week is going to result in a huge slug of landed fish, because with the 35-inch size limit, they're just not that common. And so it does give access to those fishermen who fish on the islands or the Westport area and Buzzards Bay, gives them a shot to participate in the commercial fishery, because once the fish move through the area as water's warm in July, they typically don't have as much access to the fish. So Ray, I think what's probably most logical is to just let the commission members kind of talk this through. Striped bass is always an issue that brings a lot of emotion from the public and even among our commission members. So I would recommend that you have a kind of a general discussion among the board members, but at this point, the recommendation is on the board. I'll take any questions on the memo, or if there's anything that's not clear. I know Mike Armstrong is available to us remotely. We're all remote, but Mike's available via phone. He's our representative on the Striped Bass Management Board. He's the former chairman, and he has the best handle on the assessment among the staff, other than Gary, of course, who's the lead of the technical committee. But Mike is our guy on talking about the interstate management issues. But I don't really think this is an interstate issue. I think this is strictly a state issue and how we're going to deal with this with the state issued quota. So thanks for letting me go on, and I welcome any debate, discussion, or questions.
Well, thank you, Director McKiernan. I usually like to see a motion on the board first, but under your guise, I'll open it to discussion for commission members. So Jared?
Khalil?
Yes, thank you, Jared. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Khalil. You know, folks need to realize that the commercial fishermen and the recreational anglers share this striped bass fishery, and people need to realize that each is allowed to take the quota given to them. This can be a very emotional issue, but I need to say that I feel Director McKiernan's memo is very well written, and he had a lot of collaboration from his staff. And I feel that he took into consideration the feedback he received in the public hearings. If folks remember from that, there was a variety of opinions. And also he took into consideration the written comments, and there were an awful lot of them. I can say I read every single one of them. I also feel the memo demonstrates a nice compromise for all the stakeholders involved. And I represent myself personally. I was a recreational charter guide captain, and I fished alongside the North Shore fleet. And I originally was going to vote no against the opening it a week earlier because of the commercial fellows up here on the North Shore felt that they didn't want it to be opened earlier. But listening to what Dan had to say, Director McKiernan had to say, I feel that I can be in agreement with everything that's been put forth. I think it's well thought out. Compromises have been made, and I feel that as we move down the line this year and next year, and whether quotas are met or not met, I think the Asmfc is going to have to come up with some hard decisions, possibly in the future, if in fact we talk about a stock being fished and overfishing taking place. That kind of muddies the water when people hear that. They don't understand what that means. So I think there's going to be some hard decisions coming down the line. But for this particular issue brought before us today, for the striped bass issue, I'm in favor of what was presented to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalil. Jared? Hands?
Matt Bass.
Matt Bass, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think I was just talking with Lieutenant Colonel Moran. We have no objections. I think we like the regulation. Maybe just one point of clarification that might need to be made. I can anticipate people that are going to take advantage of that overnight fishing to try to make the excuse that they're allowed, a limit for Monday and Tuesday, so they might have a greater than the 15. But so long as that's pointed out, that I believe the intent is to keep the possession limit at 15, that we have no objections.
From the way I read this recommendation, right under the catch limits, it's telling me 15 fish per boat.
Yes, that would apply as both a daily possession limit, a possession limit, and a landing limit. So I think Matt's concern is that if you're fishing overnight from Monday to Tuesday and you bring in 15 fish, and then later on Tuesday you go back out and bring in 15 fish, at that point needs to be clarified that it's only 15 fish for the day in which it is being landed and sold. Correct?
I think what we're saying is that we don't want people start their fishing day on Monday, go into Tuesday and come in with 30 fish.
Correct. I follow that, yes. Yeah, we can, if approved, and we will make that clear in the advisory we send out announcing the new rules.
Very good.
So that was Pat Moran speaking, not Lieutenant Bass. Thank you, Pat, and thank you for participating along with Lieutenant Bass. We certainly appreciate it. Any
Well-
other hand up, Jared?
Lieutenant Colonel, did you have additional comments?
Nope, all set. Thank you.
Mike Peardnock.
Michael, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jared. You know, as indicated, striped bass is very contentious. You have those that promote catch and release of striped bass. You have those that promote to eat striped bass, and you have those that promote catch and sale of striped bass. And we need to take in consideration the position of all. But in this case, with what we have before us, this is not a decision on a conservation measure. This is a decision that Atlantic States Marine Fishery Commission has provided a quota, for the commercial fleet, and they are to utilize that quota. And Mass DMF has, through the years, has had to juggle and meet with the recreational community, for-hire community, and commercial community to come up with days fishing that works for both, to minimize conflict with the recreational and commercial community. Try to make this work so too many fish aren't hitting the dock and then the price gets plummeted. And then try to make this work so back in the day, we can all remember when all the fish were landed basically on the South Shore and the quota would close up and the North Shore would not have fish to sell. And it's interesting, in your figure 3 and 4 in your memorandum, it seems as though that has shifted. And the fish are up north from Boston Harbor on north, with few south for various reasons that it's been discussed. So the point here is that this is not a decision on a conservation measure. This is a decision on access to that quota. And decision on a conservation measure, as I looked at it, was with our recent comments, if submitted by the community or the public, on Amendment 7. So with that, as I look at this, this is just an access measure. I just have a few questions or comments. And much of this also has to do with the last 10 years. DMF has done a good job to get us all at the table, rec, for-hire, and commercial, to come up with something that works for everybody. And I'm keeping in mind that precedent that was set and the decisions that were made over time to then result in possibly the decisions we have here today, and see if it's consistent with that historical precedent. So with the first one, with opening it a week earlier, I do agree. I didn't think of the issue with climatic shift and the fact that they're coming up here sooner and distributing or migrating, through the South Coast, the Cape and the Islands earlier in the year, and they don't really have access to that with that climatic shift because it's closed, which that's a good point. But my one question would be, since the Rhode Island commercial season is open concurrently, that will have striped bass hitting the market. Will this then flood it and make the price go down? And as a result, then should we go back to the original date? So that's comment number one. My other comment is that beginning 10/1, opening it up Mondays through Friday, if I understand the historical precedent the past 10 years, we have tried to avoid that. And I believe at most it was, Monday through Thursday. So those recreational for-hire anglers that are still on the water would not have conflicts Friday, Saturday, or Sunday with the commercial fleet. So with that historical precedent, should that be Monday through Thursday, not Monday through Friday after October 1st? So I throw that out there because my thought would be, don't open it a week earlier and do not include that Friday, but just keep it Monday through Thursday. That would be my recommendation at this point, but I throw it out there for discussion to just hear what the thoughts are by DMF or my fellow members. Thank you.
Ray, can I respond to Mike's issues?
By all means, Director McKiernan, please.
Yeah, so Mike, I'm going to react to the Friday in the fall, in October idea. And the reason I don't think, the reason I think this is a good one is I do concede that when the dealers came to us, they said, don't be bringing a lot of fish in on Fridays because we can't ship them. You know, there isn't, like the New York markets are closed. I think that they close on Saturday. So there is a kind of a periodicity about seafood sales. However, I'm going to suggest that based on the historical amount of fish that come in October, it's very, very low. There's very small amounts of fish that are coming in October. And I'm guessing that most of those fish could just be sold locally. At the height of the season, we don't want to have Friday as an open fishing day. The dealers have told us that time and time again. But by the time you get to October, we're talking about very low effort, and so I think those few fish that are going to be caught can be absorbed into local markets and not be shipped. So I don't think that premise holds for the fall fishery just because the effort is so low. Like the dealers don't want a bunch of fish backing up on a Friday and they can't ship them. As far as the Rhode Island fishery, Rhode Island only has a 5 fish limit and their quota, I think, is fairly low. Is it a third of ours, Jared or Nick, if you know? But I'm not expecting markets to get flooded because I don't think they contribute that much to the interstate commerce of striped bass at all. I mean, their prices have been pretty high, especially buoyed by their low trip limits.
And if I'm not mistaken, Dan, the Rhode Island fishery is open throughout most of our fishery, or throughout all of our fishery. Historically, they've just had a couple additional weeks in early June, but their quota is smaller than ours, so they may close down earlier than we do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Questions or
Suki?
comments?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion in favor of all 3 recommendations that DMF has proposed.
Okay, so Suki is making the motion to accept the recommended motion by the director. I need a second.
Amaru will second.
Bill, thank you. All those in
Ray, we're
favor?
going to do this by a roll call vote.
Oh, yes, I was just going to suggest that, please. So you can call the roll, Jared.
Bill Amaru,
Yes.
Khalil Bogdan,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Lou Williams, Mike Peardnock.
Yes. Lou Williams, sorry.
Mike Peardnock,
No.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Tim Brady,
No.
I believe the motion carries 6-2.
Thank you very much. Motion stands as recommended. And if we can come back to our second action item on the agenda, please.
One
Okay,
moment.
Well, Ray, I can begin. The second action item has to do with menhaden limits and reporting requirements for the small scale fishery. This is a little complicated and tough to follow from a distance because we have a quota, which is approved by the ASMFC, and then intermittently, we get an extra amount of fish if we apply for it. If we're reaching our overall quota, it's called the episodic event set aside. And there are rules about that ASMFC puts in their interstate plan. And then when those are done in their entirety, we then have an opportunity to go asking around other states to get additional quota to keep our fishery going at a small scale. But the purpose of this proposed rule was to try to address the fact that we felt that there were some vessels that were participating in the fishery at a fairly low trip limit, but with an inordinately large gear, which we thought was kind of conducive to overharvest or not being compliant with the 6,000 pound trip limit, or for that matter, resulting in regulatory discards. And then the second issue that we're trying to address is the reporting of that fish. So the recommendations are on the board. It's to establish a maximum purse seine of 75 fathom by 8 fathom, which is translated to 450 feet by 48 feet for the fleet that has the open access permit. That is those who aren't allowed to take more than 6,000 pounds. The second recommendation is to require the storage of menhaden into containers in order to enhance the law enforcement officers' ability to assess whether they're in compliance with the limit. The next is to define the volumetric units for these containers, similar to what's been done in other states. So we're talking about filled 55-gallon barrel would represent 350 pounds, and a standard tote would represent 117 pounds. The fourth is to define a standard tote. I think everybody knows what a standard tote is, but for regulatory purposes, that's there. Require any commercial permit holder participating in that episodic event set-aside fishery to hold a bait dealer permit and report their harvest nightly into SAFIS. And that's one of the secrets of our success with this fishery, is that we do require nightly reporting by those taking this fish. So we're really good about staying on top of the quota. And then finally, establishing a 6,000 pound trip limit for all boats when they're in that episodic event set aside fishery. Now, I know that this is a confusing rule, especially about participation and which permit you have. So I'll be calling on Nicola to help me with it. Nicola is the former chairperson of the Interstate Plan, the Interstate Commission's Menhaden Board, and she's the best among our staff at knowing the management plan and how to comply with it. So, Ray, why don't we have some discussions about these, or either you can accept a motion, but I think there will probably be some discussion about the complicated way we manage the fishery and the motion itself.
Okay, then let's open it up to discussion. Is Nicola on board? So commission members have questions, she's available.
I'm here.
Thank you, Nicola. Good morning.
Good morning.
Questions for Nicola?
Mike here, no.
Michael, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to request a 5-minute break so I can consult with, as vice chair, with you, Ray, the chairman, concerning the recent decision for the striped bass.
Okay, a 5-minute biological break.
Thank you. I'll call you, Ray. Thank you.
We're back.
Okay, we're back. So under Robert's rules, when you discuss motions, you need a motion on the board. So I would suggest before we go discussing these motions to have a motion on the board. Then we can open it up to discussion. And then the follow-up from commission members, a particular commission member might want to amend the motion. But and I think I made point of that in the previous action item. So I would like, we are now on commercial menhaden. I need a motion on the board. So somebody please make the motion.
I'll make the motion, Bill Amaru.
Thank you, Bill. I need a second.
I'll second it, Suki.
No objections?
Are we moving to debate?
Yes, now we have a motion on the board, so now we can open it up to discussion or debate. Thank you.
Bill Amaru.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the motion, I must admit ignorance of this fishery. However, I think that the level of participation from the public on the hearings was outstanding. They understand the fishery very well. I think DMF understands it very well, and it appears to me that they listen closely to the recommendations, and we see them before us, most of them. My only concern, this is where I am more familiar, is stacking fish on deck in small boats. So to begin with, I have to ask the question, what is the average size and style of the boats that are in this fishery? Because I have very little understanding of the fishery itself, because I'm concerned about the stability of small boats handling volumes of fish that we're talking about here, up to 6,000 pounds, in totes. I stacked a lot of totes on the deck of my small dragger over the years, and I can tell you there are a number of days when fish went flying in every direction. So that concern for safety is my only concern. The one public comment that I saw that directly involved comment on that particular point was very well done. It was a Coast Guard style diagram of the tipping point on a vessel and how it's affected by the weight as it moves higher up into the onto the deck of the vessel. So could I get some information first about the size and characteristics of the fleet of boats that are in this fishery?
Thank you for the question, Bill. Jared, can we research that now?
Sure.
Jared, is Story able to weigh in with any knowledge, or Nicola, about the knowledge of the participation?
By all means, please, somebody weigh in. We have a question by one of the commission members.
So I'm working on looking at permit data, but Nicola, I believe, had some conversations on this. So maybe she can fill in the gaps while I look up the permit size or the size class of our purse seine coastal access permit holders.
Thank you, Story. Nicola?
Yeah, while Story is doing that, that comment was received from someone with a 42-foot vessel, I believe. And in talking with a couple of commission members, I heard some, opinions that a vessel that, 40 feet or greater should not have a safety issue with the storing of totes, that they could be distributed on board the vessel in a way that maintains the stability, but that smaller size vessels could have implications from, barrels in particular. But Maine has a similar requirement for the storage, immediate storage on board the vessel and containers. And I did reach out to them to kind of ask if there had been industry concerns about that. And they were pretty, well established requirement there that did not get a lot of feedback, safety concerns, and that people tended to, fish within their means.
That's good. This is Bill again. That's good to hear. And I understand that that's what we always hope fishermen will do. However, it's not always the case because weather conditions can change abruptly. The Maine fishery is primarily, from what I understand, harbors and bays, embayments of the many deep bodies of water that run up to the northwest in the state of Maine. So they have a lot more protection than the open waters of Mass Bay and some of the areas that this fishery is conducted in. So there is a difference, but I will acknowledge the fact that 42 and over vessels, probably up to 50 feet or so, hopefully fairly wide, can withstand easily the 51 tote stacks. I'm assuming these totes will probably be stacked as high as 4, maybe 5 on good days. That's up to the call of the fishermen. But it is a concern I nevertheless will have for boats under 42 or 40 feet in that neighborhood. Again, my lack of familiarity with how the permit structure is distributed through the size of the vessels is going to be a little bit tough. But I do think that the requirement, if there would be some way that this, I assume, is primarily an at-sea enforcement issue, not an at the dock enforcement issue, because they have to be unloaded into some form, and it'd be much easier to determine the weight in containers or barrels or some other Bartec type containers. We all know pretty much what the weights of these containers will hold on docks. So it's an enforcement at sea issue, is it not, Dan?
That's correct. That was the motivation behind this, is to allow for more quick enforcement and compliance.
Yeah, well, I'd like to know how often vessels are checked at sea for this fishery, but can't be terribly often, I don't think. Is it a state only, or does the Coast Guard get involved in this for enforcement at sea?
State only. There's not a complementary federal rule for the Coast Guard to enforce.
Yeah. Dan, do you have any history on the numbers of boardings?
No, I would turn to Pat Moran for that.
Yeah,
Pat?
I can check and get back to you in a few minutes.
So,
all right, well,
so Bill, one of the themes, I mean, just full disclosure, I mean, one of the challenges that we have is we even had one permit holder who used to hold one of the permits to fish inside of the embayments, and used to have the high trip limit opportunity, transfer that permit and continue to fish with the same vessel and the same net. And so, when we ask law enforcement to look in on this, they look at us, I mean, for good reason. It's like, well, how do you want us to measure the quantities of fish if it's deck loaded? You know what I mean? So that is a challenge, and we brought this solution forward. And I will concede that that there are maybe safety issues, and that maybe the analogy to the main fishery is a little bit flawed, because as the person who wrote on the record talked about, Maine's fishery is probably mostly in protected waters. And specifically, we don't allow the use of these nets inside of our protected waters, except by the dozen or so historic permit holders. And the reason we have that limited entry scheme was just because of all the conflicts that have gone on over the last 40, 50 years, with not only with recreational fishermen, but with mooring fields and harbor masters. And, it's tough to operate this high volume net fishery inside a crowded harbor unless you're really good at it. And so the upside to having a small number of participants is the guys who are doing it are really good at it. I am sympathetic to your concerns, Bill, about this, and if we can just keep the conversation going here.
Okay, that sounds good to me, Dan.
I can give you the permit answer to that question, I think.
Yep.
The average size of the boats in this kind of permit class is around 38 feet, and the median is about 40 feet. So it's right in that range.
All right, well, these guys know what they're doing. I don't. I would just encourage Dan to remain poised for consideration down the road of perhaps an adjustment to this if it does turn out to be an issue for safety. That's my concern.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Any other hands, Jared?
Suki?
Yeah, thank you.
Suki, you're recognized.
I think you need to put in how many totes and how many barrels this is equivalent to, too, as part of the regulations, so a lot of people have trouble with math. So And if it's possible to have a combination of barrels and totes, you know, I guess you'll have to figure that out as you have X amount of barrels and X amount of totes, but some of the different boats have different configurations of how they may want to store them, and they might want to do some barrels and totes, but we should have a total number of totes and barrels as part of the regulation. Thanks.
That will be in the text of the regulation that the 50, it's 17, 55 gallon barrels and 51 totes.
But it's not either or. You can have a combination too also.
It wouldn't restrict you from having a combination. The math would just have to be right.
Okay, thanks.
And a part of the rationale for the 117 pounds and 350 pounds is that equates to 3 totes per barrel. So it makes it easier to do that combination of the two.
Any other
Mike-
questions?
Mike Peardnock?
Michael, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thank you for that information about the average size of the vessels being 38 to 40 feet. It somewhat ties into my question about the purse seine size of 450 feet by 48 feet. Originally, 300 by 30 was proposed, and I was under the impression this is more of a small scale fishery, not a small boat, large boat fishery. So is this 450 by 48 to accommodate the large vessels, or are the small vessels going to convert over to that size, or they will just continue with that size 30 by 30?
So this would only apply to vessels that are fishing at the 6,000 pound limit. And currently, there's either no maximum purse seine restriction as in the quota managed fishery when they're at a 6,000 pound limit. And when you go to the incidental small scale allowance after the quota is finished, we adopted the interstate FMP's rule of 900 feet by 48 feet. So we did propose 300 by 30 for the public hearing based on some, very initial industry input, and got some really good public comment that indicated that shortening the depth from 48 to 30 would essentially push the gear and the harvesters more inshore and be more likely to cause user conflict in shallower waters. And additionally, that the 300 feet could result in the need to make multiple sets and prolong the fishing activity and kind of lead to more than 6,000 fish being caught more easily. So there was one comment that had suggested 600 feet, which is what New Hampshire has, but that really wasn't tied to the 6,000 pound limit. That was tied to the fact that in New Hampshire state waters, it's a hand haul gear only. So we thought that 450 feet was a good compromise from what we had proposed and what was suggested in comment, and that it is right sized to the 6,000 pound limit.
And that's where I hear the small boats, large boats, discussion. Is the larger net size going to make the large boats then come inshore and then have a detrimental impact on the small boats? Because there'll be more effort and more landings by the large boats for the small boats that are presently targeting these fish?
So some of the large boats also have purse seine sizes applied to them through their permit conditions. If they have a Menhaden endorsement and inshore net permit, those have some conditions on the net sizes. But I don't see this increasing, the overlap. This is still a limited number of fishery participants in this fishery.
And then one other question or clarification for these vessels. I mean, they're catching these fish, and we see them near shore, so in select areas, and there's a lot more public visibility when that happens. You get the phone calls, I get the phone calls, we get the phone calls of those complaining, which it's these commercial fleet has access to this fishery, and it's appropriate for them to have access to it, but we get the phone calls. So one of the questions is, if they're out there and they catch the fish and they sell them directly to a commercial fisherman or a recreational angler, does that transaction or that fish get recorded by them ultimately at what they landed for the day?
It should be any at sea sale should be reported the same as fish that are landed. And our hope is that right sizing the net and requiring the storage into totes where it can be more easily measured will help to account for those the landings better. But it should all be reported.
Could there be consideration then to just include language to state such? Because as you said, they should. So just to make sure that it's occurring, because of that visibility and the phone calls we get, and the fact that there are more recreational for hire or commercial fishermen that go to them directly to get the fish right off the boat.
Well, that is a rule that all sold fish is to be reported.
But could you at least point that out and include that language to point that out, just to make it clear?
I'll turn to Jared to see if he thinks there's a
way to do that.
Good place to put that here, or if it's adequately covered in our.
We can certainly put it in the advisory. It is adequately covered and already covered in the reporting and permitting regulations, as well as in the set of permit conditions that we issue. All cap per se permit holders who are going to participate in the Menhaden fishery. So I'm not sure that an additional comment in the regulation is necessary, but in terms of public information, we can certainly put it in the advisory, and it's already captured in existing regulations, as well as the permit conditions that are issued annually to this fleet.
Thank you, Jared. So just for process, should I have a motion to amend to just include that in the advisory, or what's the appropriate mechanism for me to propose such?
If you want to propose to the advisory, I'll take note of that right now, and I'll do that. There's no need to make a motion to it. If you wanted to have it included in the regulation, the current motion would have to fail, and then we could re-vote up a new motion with that included as a number 7.
I thought you indicated though that it is in the regulation. It's just
it's in the existing permitting and reporting rules and regulations, as well as in the permit conditions. If you wanted it added specifically to the Menhaden rules, which are a separate set of regulations, it would require a new motion. If you just want it as part of the advisory announcing these rules, if approved, then I could do that. I'll take note of that and make sure it's in there. And
well, for simplistic purposes, unless anyone feels otherwise, I would just put it at the advisory at this point.
Okay, I'll make note of that then and make sure it's in there.
Thank you.
Questions on the recommended motion?
I'm not seeing any further questions, Mr. Chair.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I need a motion.
We have a motion. It's now to roll call vote if there's no further comments. Not seeing any further comments. Bill Amaru.
Amaru votes yes.
Bill Doyle.
Yes.
Khalil Bogdan.
Yes.
Lou Williams.
Yes.
Mike Peardnock.
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson.
Yes.
Suki Sawyer.
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on to action item number 3.
Ray,
Dan, I can cover this if you want me to.
yeah, just a quick overview and I'll hand it over, Jared. Action items 3C, D, and E are essentially technical corrections or housekeeping. And I'm going to let Jared cover them. They're non-significant in terms of their impact on the fishery. So go ahead, Jared. You can describe the 3 of them.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move these all as a single housekeeping motion and not have votes on each individual recommendation. But to provide some background on this, we're flagged by the Asmfc that our black sea bass pot rules did not have the appropriate configuration of an escape panel with a minimum size of 3 inches by 6 inches. They just describe how an escape panel is to be configured without that minimum opening size. We believe this is going to have very little impact. We received no public comment objecting to it. Our understanding is that most guys already rig a side or a door as their escape panel, and that would easily meet that minimum size. On the second item, bluefin tuna purse seining. This was a activity that the state regulated dating back to the 70s. Beginning in the early 2000s, we began issuing permit conditions to restrict deseining for tuna in state waters. Those conditions persisted for about 20 years. Now the last bluefin tuna purse seining permit has been retired as there's no more permits allowing for this activity. We are moving to strike all regulations regarding that govern the use of purse seines to take bluefin tuna and instead pursue a strict prohibition on the activity to be consistent with how this fishery has been managed for the past 20 or so years. It just cleans up the regulations. And then the last item is on mobile gear. There's a typographical error regarding the use of ground gear in North Shore exemption areas 1A and 1B. We are seeking to correct this typographical error to clarify that certain ground gear may be used subject to the existing requirements, which would be an 80-foot limit on sweeps and foot ropes, requiring the sweeps and foot ropes be composed only of chain, wire, or discs, and a prohibition on the use of roller gear. So if there's I believe you'd want a motion on this, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and one correction on your third recommendation. You got be composed only of a chair. So I would suggest you correct that.
I will correct that. One moment. Okay, so I'd be looking for a motion on this, Mr. Chair.
By all means. So this is going to be an inclusive motion of the 3 recommendations, and this is more on housekeeping than anything else.
Correct.
So will somebody please make the motion?
Suki?
Yeah, I'll make the motion on all 3 recommendations by division.
Thank you, Suki. Need a second?
Shelley will second it.
Thank you, Shelley. Anybody opposed?
Any comments? All right, we're going to proceed to a roll call vote. Bill Amaru.
Amaru votes aye.
Bill Doyle.
Yes.
Khalil Bogdan.
Yes.
Lou Williams. Lou Williams. Mike Pearnock.
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson.
Yes.
Suki Sawyer.
Yes.
Tim Brady.
Yes.
Motion passes with 1 abstention.
Thank you, Jared.
I'll pull up the agenda for you now. All right, we can move on to item 4A, Mr. Chair.
Discussion items, update on protected species issues. I don't know who's going to handle this from DMF, but
Yep, I'm gonna, the three of us, it'll be myself, Bob Glenn, and Jared Silver. And
Aaron as well.
And Aaron's on as well. Okay, thanks. So the two main issues have to do with the outreach that we've been doing to help the lobstermen and the fish potters comply with the new weak rope requirements. And that's going very well. Thanks to the MLA for featuring all of this on the front page of their recent newsletter that we received. And there's also talk, there'll be a brief presentation on what we're proposing for a public hearing item regarding marking of rope. So Bob Glenn, which item do you want to tackle first?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So I think we'll tackle the buoy line marking proposal first. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to quickly give commissioners an update of where we are in the whale season right now. We're kind of at the height of the season. Surveillance flights are ongoing by both CCS and by National Marine Fisheries Service. Yesterday's flight in Cape Cod Bay and down the backside showed that there are not as many whales inside Cape Cod Bay right now, but a lot of whales down the backside. Recent surveillance by NIMS last week up in Mass Bay also showed a lot of whales up in the Mass Bay area. And as I said, down the backside, and then other surveillance by National Marine Fisheries Service shows some big aggregations whales, both south of Nantucket and south of Martha's Vineyard. And so my point is like right now, it looks like the whales might be dispersing. We talked to Stormy Mayo, and he was on the fence thinking that it could be a sign of dispersal, but we certainly can't count on that. The whales could come in, but they essentially have us surrounded right now. There's a lot of whales in and around the area. And so I just want to update that. I know as the season wears on, folks are more and more interested relative to us managing the closure. I know that, for example, we can rely on some of the NIMS surveying. Their schedule roughly their flights are in such a pattern that they're hitting Mass Bay and the area up around Cape Ann about once a week. As we get closer to the end of the closure, we're going to work with CCS to direct some surveillance up on coast and state waters up along Mass Bay and Cape Ann as we get closer to monitor that situation, so we can Dan can make a decision on whether to open the fishery prior to the May 15th closure. Prior to the May 15th opening. So we'll keep folks posted on that as close to real time as possible, and we'll continue to monitor the situation. We're definitely into the point of the right whale season where Dan, Aaron, and myself are buckling our seatbelts and kind of watching daily surveillance. Hoping that we start to see things disperse. So I just wanted to give that update, and then now I'll have Jared, if you would, pull up the gear marking proposal. Thanks, Jared. So at the last commission meeting, I brought this issue to you all, looking at what's proposed in the federal rule for gear marking and specific concerns that DMF had about the gear marking proposed by National Marine Fisheries Service being insufficient to properly differentiate lobster gear that was authorized and set under a federal permit versus that set under a state permit. And our worry that, especially moving forward in the incidental take permit application, we need to really track entanglements to a point and not mistakenly get credited with an entanglement that occurred in federal waters because of this gear marking issue. And so as I mentioned before, on the left was actually what's up right now is what would be proposed for gear marking. On the left would be a federal waters fisherman would have a 1 3-foot mark in the top 12 feet plus a 1 foot green mark and then red. And then a state waters fisherman would only have red. The issue with that is in many entanglements, the surface system and the top several feet of rope are what's lost. And so what's left behind is just rope with red marks. And that's, clearly that's the mass color, and we're concerned with that. So we brought this up to National Marine Fisheries Service, and they're looking into it as well. But for our purposes, we need to do two things is with this rule. We need to both differentiate ourselves from the federal gear so as not to get blamed for an entanglement. But also we need to mark in a manner and in a frequency that clearly distinguishes us from all the other fisheries in our quest to get listed separately on the NMFS list of fisheries. And so based on some feedback that we received from National Marine Fisheries, as well as from some folks in the industry, we proposed the following. And for state waters, it would be 1 3-foot solid red mark in the top 12 feet, and then at least 4 2-foot solid or non-solid red marks in the body of the line. So if you look at for state waters, that would be the middle figure here, what it would look like. That's regardless of length. And on top of that, to leverage our weak contrivance rule, we are also having a requirement that there no length of line greater than 60 feet not have a red mark. And so that fisherman can achieve that just by inserting the red rope or a sleeve that has a red tracer in it, which they all currently do. And so that would be for state waters. And federal waters is what we're proposing on the left. It's similar to what NMFS proposed, except, I should mention on the state waters one, the size of the marks is also increasing from a 1 foot mark to a 2 foot mark. The reason for that is because there's a lot of legacy 1 foot marks in the fishery. Right now, Northeast pot trap gear is currently marked with 1 foot red marks. That's for the entire coast. And so we were concerned that we don't want to get also blamed for a bunch of legacy red marks that are out there from other jurisdictions. So by increasing the length of the mark to 2 feet, that also differentiates Massachusetts. For federal waters, we would be adding the marking scheme on the left, which would be a 3 foot solid red mark, followed by a 1 foot solid green mark, and then an additional, at least 3 additional 2 foot solid or non-solid marks, 1 foot of which must be red and the other foot must be green. And so this would apply to all federal permit holders who are based out of Massachusetts. When fishing in federal waters, they would not be allowed to fish these green marks in the state waters portion. And then finally, our rules for Area 3 boats, federal off waters are on the far right. Those are the black marks with the green mark. That is just basically following what's proposed for Area 3 by National Marine Fisheries Service. And so, yeah, here's a comparison of the marks. Again, on the left is what we're proposing. On the right was what National Marine Fisheries Service proposed, and we commented against. Next slide, Jared. And then Jared, I'm going to here's the point where I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sure. So we are expecting to obtain approval to announce these rules as a draft tomorrow. And with that, we will announce a public hearing and public comment period. I anticipate a public hearing will be held on May 11th, 6 p.m. via Zoom. And we will then conclude the public comment period on May 14th. Some of these details, again, are being worked out as we're waiting for approval on this. Accordingly, where I was discussing with the chairman earlier, and I think the director will bring up in his at the end of the meeting, is moving the May commission meeting from May 13th to later in the month, either the 20th or the 27th, to accommodate a recommendation on this. And then if approved, we would be moving to file final regulations by the end of June. These regulations will then be effective on February 1. Why we're trying to file them by the end of June deals with our incidental take permit application. Our lobster fishery, State Waters lobster fishery, is currently classified as part of the Northeast Mid-Atlantic lobster fishery on NOAA's list of fisheries, and that covers all state and federal waters fisheries from New York to Maine. For our take permit application to be successful, we have to distinguish ourselves from this fishery and minimize and mitigate for all potential sources of risk. So that's why we're taking a more conservative approach to this. We also have to apply to NOAA to be listed separately on their list of fisheries. They review the list of fisheries annually, and we're expecting that they will put out a draft list in September and October. So by enacting these rules now for 2022, we can have our fishery be considered separate on the 2022 list of fisheries, which paves our way to apply for an incidental take permit in 2022. Bob, did I miss anything on that? Because I know it's a little nuanced.
No, I think you did it. You described it very well, Jared. Yeah, and the only thing I would add is that we have kind of shared what our plan is with National Marine Fisheries Service to both the GARFO and also to Protected Species Headquarters folks, trying to understanding that they can't tell us definitively whether or not what we proposed is going to be sufficient for this distinction. But I did get them to admit that what we're proposing is consistent with measures that would be considered distinct. So that I from National Fishery Service, I view that as a pretty high indicator that we're in pretty good shape with what we're proposing. So yeah, I would just add that. Thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Great job describing all of that. I just want to say to the commission, remind them that we're going to trial in June. It's the case Strahan versus EEA and DMF concerning potential or concerning entanglements, and the fact that the judge ordered us back in April of 2020 to apply for and receive an incidental take permit within 90 days. So we've explained to the judge in subsequent meetings or hearings that you don't get a permit within 90 days, but it takes longer, maybe a year or two or more. But that's what we're working toward. So we are under the direction of a federal judge to obtain an incidental take permit for our state waters fisheries. And that's why we're proceeding with this. I also want to concede that this is a pain in the ass for fishermen, especially those who are going to be fishing both sides of the state federal waters line. All I can say is I really appreciate all the patience that the industry has shown to date, and I'm begging for more because we're doing everything we can to keep the fishery continuing as we know it, which includes the setting of vertical lines, the incorporation of weak rope to minimize any harm in the event of an entanglement, and to mark the gear in such a way that Massachusetts can be exonerated from the entanglements that occur, especially when you don't get to see the gear that's on the line and you only have a remnant piece of rope, which is the norm. When I say remnant, the last two entanglements that we've had show up off Massachusetts coast had over 300 feet of 5/8-inch poly rope. Now that doesn't sound like a remnant, but we think it was a remnant from the Canadian snow crab fishery. But it's these kind of gear marking schemes that other states and the Canadian government are now adopting, that's going to provide a lot of clarity in the future about where and when these entanglements are occurring. So thanks for letting me mention that.
Questions, please.
Suki?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Bob or Dan, is the federal permitted Massachusetts guys part of this lawsuit, or is it just basically against state waters fishermen?
So, I mean, it's specifically against the Secretary of Environmental Affairs and the Division of Marine Fisheries. And so what's at stake is our ability to authorize the use of buoyed fishing gear in state waters.
Okay, that being said, Dan, why are we differentiating federal Massachusetts lobstermen from other federal lobstermen by having, additional markings? There's already an issue about these guys having to bring their, change buoy lines when they come back into federal waters or go out into federal waters. Now you're adding another layer of markings onto them to separate them from other federal fishermen. But my understanding is all the federal lobster guys are in the same boat.
I can take that.
Go ahead, Bob. Yep.
Yeah. So Suki, the marking in federal waters is a reaction to what NIPS plans on requiring an additional color be flown, the state color be flown for all their federal permit holders, and they're going to base it on their port of origin. And so, a Massachusetts-based federal waters fishermen would have to have those red marks. Maine would have to have purple, New Hampshire yellow, and Rhode Island silver. And so that's a federal rule. But as written, we felt that the federal rule put a lot of extra red marks in the ocean in federal waters that basically we couldn't separate from state waters marks. And so that's why we added the green mark. So where NIPS is going forward with state-specific gear marking for federal waters fishermen, we're in our view, we're just kind of amending it to make sure that we can truly, in the case of an entanglement, really differentiate a mass-based state waters fisherman versus a mass-based federal waters fisherman.
Yeah, I understand that, Dan. Maybe I'm not up to date on the federal markings, but you're proposing 2 foot of red in federal waters, four marks, or am I wrong on that?
No, we're proposing for federal waters, it would be a 2 foot mark, 1 foot of which would be red, the other foot of which would have to be green.
Okay, so the feds are planning to do that to everybody, just, are we still back? They're only gonna have the one green mark up at the top.
No, it's my understanding that right now the feds are considering changing their rule based on our comments that we made to make all federal fishermen to fly the color of their both their home state as well as the green federal marks adjacent to them. I think NIMS are, I mean, I can't predict with 100% certainty, but I think they're leaning towards adopting similar to what we're actually proposing based on our comments.
And Bob, just to clarify, NIMS's rule is still undergoing deliberation. So you're talking about them coming out with a final rule that's slightly different than their proposed rule. So
correct.
That's what you meant, that their final rule may be different than what they proposed.
That's correct.
Okay, because I thought that was still up in the air and Mass was just going ahead with, their extra stuff for the Mass guys. Okay. And one other thing, Dan or Bob, can we be more upfront about the right whales spotting up in the North Shore area? We told everybody to take the gear out of the ocean, and I'm in the loop, I thought, but I haven't heard of any flights up here of what's been seen. And it's hard to tell guys just on the dock what's going on when we don't know that they're actually seeing anything up in this area or not.
Yes, we will share that with you. right away and going into this next month, which is the critical time.
Yeah, I can tell you that a surveillance off of Gloucester occurred on both April 6th and I believe April 13th. And neither of those flights off of Gloucester were right whales spotted. A flight, I believe, on the 12th of April or somewhere around that time frame, just south in Mass Bay, there were a number of right whales there. But we can, as Dan indicated, if it's helpful for us to kind of recirculate the federal surveillance data and the CCS surveillance data, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the federal stuff, Bob. I see the other stuff. You know,
Yep.
bad or indifferent, I think we just should be share the information out there. So, you know, if they see right whales, then people know there's right whales around, and so be it. If they don't see any, there's going to be a lot of repercussions because of that. But we just to have the information is the best path, I think.
Yep, great point. I agree, Suki. We'll make sure we start forwarding that. Is our Marine Fisheries Advisory a good vehicle to get to the fishermen with that, Suki?
Yeah. Yeah, just on your website should be fine. I mean, the people that don't look at it anyway. So I think most people would like to see the information.
Okay.
All right, thanks for that.
Yep.
Bill Amaru?
Thank you. There's hardly a day that goes by that I don't see a fisherman down around the docks, because I'm still fishing, I'm on the water, and lobstermen are always willing to talk about the requirements, and I'm pretty optimistic about the attitude and that most of them have, and I'm certain when they hear about where this pain is affecting Dan, they'll be even happier. So my hat off to the industry for accepting the requirements that are being handed down. I think that this is going to be something, especially on the state level, that's going to work quite well. And when the feds, I don't want to say too much negative about them, but when they get to the point where they're starting to look more closely at the way our state manages its lobster fishery for markings and gets on board with it, the better off we'll all be. The industry is showing remarkable willingness to adapt, and hasn't been easy, but I see them at the docks working on their gear. They're inserting the breakaways. They're coming up with ideas and solutions. I think some of them have been in contact with the division, and I'm more optimistic than I was a couple of months ago. I can tell you that much. And as far as the lawsuit goes, I hope the judge has been doing some research, or their staff people have been doing some research on the wording of some of these rules and regulations, because to think that they weren't aware of the fact that a take permit is a long, involved process, and that we were supposed to come up with one in 90 days is pretty amazing. But by now, I'm certain they must have a better idea of it, and they'll cut us the slack we need to get in a position where we've got everything in place for the permit. I know this state has certainly gone a long way towards doing that, and I hope that's recognized in the court. So those are my comments. I think that all of this is doable. The state side of it looks very functional. If that ever happens, that these things, these animals get involved with our markings and our gear, that there should be explanations that would be forthright, and we won't be saddled with the guilt of having a whale in our area that comes up with ropes on it and everyone assuming it's something to do with our local fishery. And I believe that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to be exonerated far more often than we're going to be accused in the future. So thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any further questions or comments on this.
All right, I have a question, Jared. First off, it's a comment. I want to commend Bob Glenn and his staff for the work they put into this. And his presentation at the public hearing was fantastic. So my hat's off to Bob Glenn and Aaron Barrick and everybody who works for Bob down in the New Bedford office. My question, February on the timeline, February 1st, 2022. So is that inclusive of all the gear in the Nantucket Sound where we have such a large body of right whales? I'm speaking specifically to the conch fishermen and the black sea bass pot fishermen. Are they going to have to have?
For this round of rulemaking, Gray, the current buoy line marking requirements for our fish pot and conch pot fishing will not change. This new rule only applies to lobster gear.
Thank you. Any other questions for Bob, Glenn, or Jared on this?
Not seeing any further questions, Mr. Chair, we'll move to the second part of this, which deals with the gear distribution.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. What, if you could give the screen, okay, you have the screen right here. Never mind. I didn't know if Aaron had a separate presentation or not. So I'll just introduce it quick and then turn it over to Aaron. So first off, I'd like to thank Aaron and also especially Justin Wilson, who's our gear technologist working on this. They have done an outstanding job trying to get this weak rope out to the fishing industry, and at the same time trying to work with fishermen to both develop contrivances and then get them approved through the process that has been established by NIMS in the States. And so they've done an excellent job. This work is still ongoing, and we will continue to work as fast as we can to get this out. In fact, I know today we have an event in Gloucester I think we have 125 fishermen who are signed up that we'll be providing rope to. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Hi. As Bob mentioned, we're using funds through an Asmfc grant and from the governor to supplement fishermen with coils of weak rope and the South Shore sleeve, which is another weak contrivance that's approved. We will be providing 2 coils of rope to every trap pot fisherman in Massachusetts and up to 20 sleeves. And we've been hosting gear distribution events throughout the state for the last month or so. To date, we've distributed about 720 coils of rope and 7,200 sleeves to around 360 fishermen. And we've conducted events in Rockport, Gloucester, Scituate, Plymouth, Sandwich, New Bedford, Chatham, small event in Provincetown, and just yesterday we were on Martha's Vineyard. Today we have a large event, so our third in Gloucester, and we're planning an event in Boston as well. So we've been trying to get this gear out to fishermen as quickly as we can get it into our warehouse and receive it from Ketchum and Nova Braid. So it's been we're tracking the fishermen that are reaching out to us that they're interested and trying to figure out, all right, how much gear do we have? What events could we do this week? When do we have gear coming in next? What event can we do after that? So it's been sort of a Tetris game there. Next slide. We've also been developing, trying to perfect and work out some of the kinks with DMF's website relative to getting information to fishermen about this buoy line modifications. We do have a web page where we have information about approved contrivances and what the regulations are and who you should contact for questions. We have the Conservation Solutions email address where fishermen can direct their questions, and if they need gear and they haven't received it yet. And so that goes directly to Justin and I believe Julia and some other folks at DMF as well. We've also been, continuing to receive potential contrivance ideas from fishermen and evaluating those and working with Maine and NIMS to get those tested and see if they can be approved. So if fishermen have any additional ideas, they should contact Justin and we can work with them to figure out if these contrivances will work and getting them approved. That's all.
Thank you, Aaron.
Questions for Aaron?
Okay.
Yeah, good morning, Aaron. Either you or Bob, have you received any of the candy cane rope 2.0 yet? And have you sent it up for any testing?
We were supposed to get a shipment of, I think 100 coils of the candy cane last week. Right now, we're not putting that out in distribution. Our plan with that is because we have enough red rope right now to meet current demands for week inserts. We're going to identify fishermen who would like to test fishing fully formed candy cane rope, and we will give them multiple coils to set up buoy lines to fish with. And then at the end of the season, we'd probably ask to get some of that line back so we can test it and evaluate it to see. Because our hope moving forward is to be able to give fishermen some additional information. If they're going to invest in buying a quantity of rope to fish fully formed weak rope, we want to make sure that they're we can give them information about what's working well and any issues that we might have with that. So Aaron, can you confirm that we got the 100 coils of weak rope of candy cane last week?
I don't know that for sure. I know that we've had some of version 1. I'm not sure about version 2.
Yeah,
and I'll find out.
Yeah, we can let you know on that. I get a weekly update from Ketchum Trap, who is handling all our rope orders right now, and we've made several large orders which they're filling as they get availability from the manufacturer, and so I get weekly updates of what they're shipping. I know we either have or are soon to get the candy cane rope.
Yeah, because I know guys are using it, Bob, and I noticed on your webpage that you singled out for butts placing, just red rope instead of, having both ropes. So I was just wondering, I'm pretty sure guys are being able to splice this 2.0 stuff, and I think some people are using it. So I think Myron is selling that stuff. So
yep,
should try to do something about trying to get it approved or do something.
Yeah, I mean, it is currently approved to use fully formed, and it's also currently approved for the several, there's 3 or 4 different contrivances that were tested that are approved with that. And so, but we can, we're going to continue to work on it, and we'll make sure we get the information out as soon as possible.
Okay, I just saw that and I just thought it needed to be dealt with or addressed somehow. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Khalil.
Thank you, Jared. And I thought that was interesting. Where we have kind of forced this upon the lobstermen, the 360 fishermen. I'm pleased that we are supplying the rope and sleeves to them. And I was just wondering, this may be more appropriate for Kevin Crichton. I'm curious as to, is this a line item in the budget, or is this grant money, or where is the money being raised to supply all this rope and sleeves?
So there's 2 sources. One was a portion of it was through a grant provided by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, who was given a pot of money from NOAA to distribute to the states to assist fishermen with complying with all the new TRT whale rules that are forthcoming. So we got $250,000 grant from them, and with that we're purchasing the first large orders of rope and sleeves. That's also paying for us to have Justin Wilson working on this. And in addition to that, the Governor Baker reached out, his staff reached out and asked about, what other additional resources DMF would need to work on this whale conservation issue. And one of the items that we identified was additional funds to pay for, more weak rope and sleeves for fish and help fishermen comply with this rule. And so the Governor Baker also allocated an additional $200,000 specifically for us to buy this. And so what that's been excellent. And that's what we've been using and most recently for the additional orders of rope that we've made.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I've got a question, Jared. This is probably to the director. Being how the public is mandating all these changes to the harvesters, our state harvesters, is there any way of accessing any of that CARES money, the $22 million, So the lobstermen or anybody who is implicated in this whole plan, being conch fishermen, black sea bass fishermen, we could subsidize these harvesters for the cost of this gear. Is there any way we could take money from the CARES Act money, Dan?
I don't think so, Ray. It's pretty specific to the impact that COVID had on the fishing industry, but that doesn't prevent anyone who might get payment through this to use it for that purpose. But I don't think that the federal legislation that authorized this money would allow us to send a spending plan to NIMS with the rationale to allocate money for protected species purposes.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate what Governor Baker has done in ASMFC, but hearing other commission members and likewise myself, this is really being mandated by the public, and I think there should be money made available to the harvesters on gear replacement, on wharf replacement. That's all. Those are my feelings. But I've heard.
Yeah, Ray, I know that a number of Congress folks have filed bills regarding right whales. I believe one was filed by Cory Booker. Another one, or the same one, was also signed on to by Seth Moulton. And so there is legislation that has been filed, but I don't know that it's seen the light of day yet. The money that has been mentioned, it was went through ASMFC. That was congressionally appropriated, and it was for this purpose. It was, I think, filed by Susan Collins in Maine, and it was for the states of Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Mass, and Maine to comply with these upcoming whale rules. So to some degree that was done, and that's how we got the 250, Bob? Is that we got $250,000?
Yes.
Yeah. But I take your point, Ray, that more money's needed.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions, comments?
Shelley?
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, I just would like to extend my thanks to DMF for coming out to the vineyard yesterday. It was a huge help to have them come and set up and distribute the coil to our fishermen. So I just wanted to send along a big thanks for that.
Thank you, Shelley.
I'm not seeing any further comments or questions. I'll bring the agenda back up, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. Okay.
Now down to 4B.
Okay, updates from the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. I presume this will be Nicola.
It is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this should be relatively quick because the one action that was scheduled to occur since your last meeting was actually postponed until December. And that was the final action on the commercial recreational allocation amendment for fluke scup and sea bass. There was a meeting between the Mid-Atlantic Council and the ASMFC board earlier this month. And ultimately, it was felt that action on this, far-reaching amendment should be postponed in order to let some additional work that's being done on the recreational management side be furthered because there could be implications from that on the commercial recreation allocation amendment options and how people think about them essentially. And additionally, and maybe it might help broker some compromise. The commercial fishery was very much in favor of status quo on the allocation amendment, while the recreational fishery is interested in generally bringing in more recent years' performance into the allocations. And that there may be some fairness and equity issues with doing that because of the differences in how the fisheries are managed, where the commercial fishery can never exceed its quota, the recreational fishery can. And so changing the allocations just based on that may have some implications. So in the meantime, there's a couple of board members, myself included, that are working on some additional potential options that are kind of within the range of the current alternatives that may address some of the public comment that was received. So we'll be trying to get that looked at before the final action is scheduled to occur on this in December. But the implementation date has been flagged in the motion for 2023. The implications for the 2022 recreational fisheries at this point is unknown, but all three of these species are going to go through a stock assessment this summer. So that'll play into whatever happens for the fishery specifications for next year. And the other thing that I would note is that the agenda for the spring ASMFC meeting has been posted. That's going to happen in the first week of May, and a couple of high interest board actions may be the striped bass board, which is scheduled to determine which of the issues to include in Amendment 7 following the scoping hearings on the public information document over the last month or so. The Menhaden board will also be determining whether to initiate action on commercial quota reallocation. And the policy board is going to be considering an appeal from the state of New York on the state-by-state commercial black sea bass reallocation method that was voted on by the board in February. So there's a whole lot of allocation issues going on right now, it's fair to say. And the ASMFC is actually putting together a working group that's going to be, further kind of diving into that issue, because it is, I would say, one of the more challenging issues across many species that the ASMFC is dealing with right now as fishery distributions change, environmental conditions change, and many of the allocations that are in the FMPs have been in place for a decade or 2 or 3 at this point. So that's it from me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Questions for Nicola?
I'm not seeing any hands at this time, Mr. Chair.
So, Nicola, I received an email from Bob Beal. I guess that working group has been finalized.
I believe so, unless Dan cares to offer an addition to it.
No.
Okay. It has been. We'll even if we're still gonna be following the progress of that working group.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, you work hand in hand, or you work well with Jason McNamee from Rhode Island.
Right, and he's on that working group. So we'll definitely be staying engaged on that.
Thank you very much. I didn't know if that was for political reasons, whether they wanted to use your clout at the table, because you always make formidable motions. So that was my question. All right, thank you very much, Nicola. Moving on, we're going to take a 5-minute break, folks, before this presentation on the Massachusetts Ocean Acidification Report. That is, unless there's questions for Nicola. No questions for Nicola, Jared?
No questions, Mr. Chair. We'll proceed to a 5-minute break and reconvene at 11:08.
Thank you. Dan, you're recognized.
Yeah, so Raymond, this Ocean Acidification Commission was a legislatively enacted initiative, I think from like 2 or 3 years ago, and it wound up meeting over the last year, and it just released its report I think, just a few months ago. And Mark was the director's designee. The director of the Division Marine Fisheries was part of it, as was many of the legislators and other agencies, and Mark could get into some of this. So just so the commission knows, legislature on its own enacted this commission to the blue ribbon panel, so to speak, to create a strategic plan regarding ocean acidification. Pass it to Mark now.
Okay, just confirming that you can see my screen and that you can hear me.
Yes. Confirmed, Mark.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks. Today I'll be providing an update on the Massachusetts Ocean Acidification Commission. The agenda will start off with a general definition of what ocean acidification is. It will describe the process, the Mass Ocean Acidification Commission and its charge, discuss the findings and recommendations of the Ocean Acidification Commission's report, and update progress on Bill 2084, which was filed in February. So in August of 2018, the act was passed. The purpose of the act was to review the relevant scientific data and information related to coastal and ocean acidification, to conduct some public hearings and create a report of the findings and policy recommendation. The charge of the commission was to compile this information, coordinate with the Northeast Coastal Acidification Network and the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, to conduct public hearings and to write and submit the reports along with drafts of legislation needed to carry out the recommendations. So the commission members included 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, the director of the Division of Marine Fisheries or a designee, the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection or a designee, the director of Coastal Zone Management, and 8 persons that were appointed by the governor, 2 of whom represented environmental or community groups, 3 of whom were commercial fishermen, including 1 who was a holder of a shellfish aquaculture license, 1 who was a holder of a commercial lobster permit, and 1 who was a holder of a commercial shellfish permit. And also 3 additional people who are scientists who have studied coastal or ocean acidification. So the definition of ocean acidification was addressed at the first commission meeting in a presentation given by Jenny Rubin, a research associate from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. In her presentation, she describes how the world's oceans have become increasingly more acidic since the Industrial Revolution. So ocean acidification is the decrease in the pH of the Earth's oceans caused by the uptake of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The main drivers of ocean acidification are anthropogenic emissions of CO2 and nutrient pollution leading to the eutrophication of coastal waters. It's a threat to many marine species, including species of economic importance to Massachusetts, such as sea scallop and eastern oyster. Massachusetts is also at risk because of natural estuarine acidification and a number of eutrophic estuaries in the state. It's believed that Massachusetts will be disproportionately affected by ocean acidification due to the relative importance of its coastal economies and environments. Potential adaptation and mitigation strategies could include reducing nutrient pollution, buffering seawater for hatcheries, eelgrass restoration and kelp aquaculture to enhance localized CO2 uptake. The meetings, the timeline for the meetings, they began in November of 2019 and they continued through February 2021. There is a COVID pause in there where the earlier meetings, which were primarily held for informational exchange purposes, were postponed because of COVID. And then the commission refocused its efforts in June of last summer to work towards getting that final report completed by the February deadline. Commissioners were split into four different groups: scientific literature review, shellfish and marine industries, monitoring and barrier beaches, and policy and outreach. And the bulk of the data collection and synthesis was done by these working groups. Commission also used DMF's listserv to schedule public hearing notices and to send out a survey to shellfish and marine industry online to about 3,000 commercial lobster and shellfish permit holders, and to circulate announcements on public hearing notices to collect industry input. So the final report was released on February 9th, 2021. Initial drafts began to be circulated December of 2020 for commissioners to provide input on. The report was authored by two legislative aides out of Representative Dylan Fernandes' office, Joshua Williams and Slater Sharp. It's an 84-page document, and it is available online at the link provided. And there was extensive input to this report from several commission members. So I'm going to go through some of the highlights of the report right now. I'm not going to go through all 84 pages, but and you're welcome to check the report out at any time. But there were some key features that I thought would be worth highlighting here quickly. And this one here talks about how as atmospheric CO2 increases, the world's oceans are becoming more acidic. This is just to really provide some background on the status of ocean acidification locally and globally. The next slide talks about pH fluctuations occurring naturally throughout the year. And in the Northeast, the waters are generally more acidic than waters further south. And it sort of further demonstrates that Massachusetts has some vulnerability to ocean acidification. This slide really focuses on local eutrophication and nutrient pollution. And it can cause sharp increases in ocean acidification. And we have seen recent examples of hypoxic events in Massachusetts also, which can also contribute to increases in ocean acidification. There are winners and losers in the ocean acidification battle, so to speak. This slide points out that the losers will tend to be the mollusks, such as eastern oysters and sea scallops. There is the potential for there to be some winners also, seagrasses and some of the diatoms and fleshy algae. And this slide, this is a page that emphasizes the importance of shellfishing in the marine industry to the economy of Massachusetts. You know, Massachusetts generates more than $600 million in gross state product annually, and the sector employs more than 5,700 individuals across more than 500 establishments and generates over $300 million annually in wages. And because of the economic importance, Massachusetts is particularly more vulnerable to the effects of OA, particularly the mollusks and the crustaceans. And aquaculture is also of a concern because aquaculture has experienced significant growth over the last decade. And then the long-term economic effects of ocean acidification will vary based on the actions that are taken now. So there were some projections made in terms of what the long-term impacts would be with respect to ocean acidification to Massachusetts. Some projecting that these predictive models portray different forecasts based on mitigation efforts taken now. So, and the mitigation examples here that are provided in the report range from doing nothing to taking some very significant steps. And you can see that the projections themselves are very variable. The commission also took an extensive inventory of water quality monitoring programs that are ongoing throughout the state and found that most are not really set up to collect acidification parameters. Many existing programs sample pH, but generally not frequently enough or in enough detail to capture trends. So this was a pretty big highlight of the report, in basically indicating that more work is needed to explore the effects of ocean acidification in Massachusetts. And then the commission, based on the report, outlined a series of recommendations. Nothing has been flushed out yet, so these recommendations that are in the report, the sort of the next piece to this would be to come up with the legislation to address these. Some of the things that were recommended were water use fees, or gasoline taxes, or shellfish preservation license plates. And some of these recommendations were drawn from examples that were given by ocean acidification efforts in other states. So you'll see these in the report also. And then finally, the overview, the commission voted to adapt the report on February 9th following a public hearing. The draft language to be included in the legislative filing was circulated amongst the commission members for commenting. The language itself has not been finalized yet. So to summarize commission recommendations, immediately was to establish an Ocean Acidification Council and Ocean Acidification Trust to coordinate efforts, conduct a gap analysis for ocean monitoring, and to educate the public about ocean acidification. And then there are several other recommendations that look at longer term things to focus on longer term, within 2 years, within 5 years, or within 10 to 15 years. And you can read those in the report if you'd like. On the current status of the bill SD 2084 filed by Senator Julian Sear was referred to the Committee on the Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture on the 29th of March of 2021. I reviewed the bill this morning, and there is it's currently in draft form, and there is no language in the bill indicating how some of the recommendations will be funded going forward. And I think that's going to be the focus of some of the legislative aid work going forward. So that's all I have right now. And I think it would be best to open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mark, for that presentation. As he suggested, questions for Mark.
Khalil.
Thank you, Mark. That was very interesting. This whole thing with pH shifts, whether it's going from 7 to acidic or 7 up to being not acidic. Would you say that the oceans have reached the tipping point regarding the ability of diatoms and other phytoplankton to be able to absorb the increased amount of carbon dioxide that's being produced? At one time, it was supposed to be the equalizer for the CO2. So would you say that we're at a tipping point?
I'm not prepared to say that. No, I'm not really sure. I think what really needs to happen going forward to address ocean acidification at this point is to establish some robust sampling where we can really get a handle on what the numbers actually are, both locally along the coast for the coastal acidification problem, and then also in the ocean, sort of offshore, what the ocean acidification problem looks like. I think locally, some of the coastal acidification problems can be addressed by addressing some of the eutrophication that's occurring locally. But I think the trying to get some of that baseline data now is really important for to address the ongoing ocean acidification issue.
Yeah, thank you. The eutrophication is quite a phenomenon. Sometimes when that event starts to take place, it's very difficult to reverse it. And so I realize that, whether we're talking about back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, we were concerned about the freshwater ponds receiving the westerly winds, the nitrous stuff that was coming off of the stacks from the Midwest. And it seems that we don't hear much about it anymore. So it's really interesting that this research is going on. And I really appreciated what you had to say. But I'm just hoping that somehow through this research, we can find a way to reserve the eutrophication, because that's a tough phenomenon to reverse.
Bill Amaru?
Thank you. Good report, Mark. Very technical field, but you've presented it in a way the layman can understand, like me. I have a technical question that I think you can probably answer. Is the degree of acidification pretty much equal throughout the water column down to the bottom? And our fisheries on the Georges Bank, Gulf of Maine, Mass Bay waters, is that something that can be determined?
I don't know if it's equal throughout the water column. My sense is it's probably not. I think that some surface influence as well as some subsurface influence may affect acidification levels. So it's hard to say. I think that what really needs to happen with respect to ocean acidification going forward is some technology needs to be put in place, or some type of sampling parameters need to be established that can really get a good handle on what the trends are, three-dimensionally within the water.
Am I the only one that's not hearing him?
No, Bill, I don't hear him either.
Okay. Can't hear you, Mark. Check your hardware. Well, I hope he can get back to us, as those are important questions. My reason for wanting to know is we have a very valuable resource on the very bottom of the ocean. That I don't know about the planktonic phase of scallops, but you back? But the threat to the scallop resource, if it turns out that the mixing isn't terribly complete, especially in the deeper water, it augurs good for the future of the resource in deeper waters anyway. But
Can you hear me?
There you go.
I don't know where I cut out. I'm sorry. I have a computer issue with Zoom. So
okay. So you had said that mixing is not complete. It's not a homogenized mass of water out there. It's probably more concentrated at the top levels, and that would bear out what I would expect too, because of the tremendous temperature differences between bottom and surface temperature in the summer anyway. But there is a certain amount of mixing that takes place when the cold waters of a cold winter sink to the bottom. So there's a considerable mix that occurs every year because of that anyway. And my question also on a comment maybe is the SD rule that Julian Sear submitted. Is there any way we can find out what that says, and whether or not this commission should embrace that and recommend to the full House or Senate that it be aggressively pursued? An area, it's tremendously important to our natural resources that these chemicals can be understood better, and more can be done to focus in on our knowledge of what is out there, how it's being absorbed. Diatoms was mentioned earlier. If we are at a tipping point for where the environment can no longer continue to absorb these enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and other chemicals, we could be facing problems which make what we're facing right now seem insignificant.
So I can answer. You can follow the progression of the bill on the legislator's website. If you just Google SD 2084, you'll come to a web page that provides you with updated information on the status of the bill. And if you read it now, it's obviously incomplete. There's no language in there that talks about any of the funding mechanisms that are recommended in the report. And some of those are, important to this particular group, because some of those recommendations could include some of the licenses and permits around commercial and recreational fishing. So So keep that in mind because those things were put on the table at one point during the commission meetings. So it's not clear where those are going to end up going forward.
Okay. I'm going to look into that and talk to the director about the possibility of us having a more extensive discussion down the road. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mark. Questions for Mark from commission members?
Mike Peardock.
Michael, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. With this recent data and information, have you or considered looking at whether there's any connection with the recent conditions that we've had in Cape Cod Bay with the die-offs of lobster deeper in the water column? Is there anything connection that may be associated with these factors, or is that still yet to be determined? Thank you.
I think it's still yet to be determined. I think the DO event that occurred in Lower Cape Cod Bay the last 2 years was mentioned on several occasions during our commission meetings. But I think the general consensus was it's really too early to tell what the connectivity is with acidification at this point.
Thank you.
Jared, questions?
I'm not seeing any further hands raised, Mr. Chair.
So I would suggest if commission members, if there's some way we could post Mark's email address, or maybe commission members should get in touch with you, Jared, and then they could have offline conversations with Mark on updates.
Sure.
Until
If there's follow-up questions, they can. I'll put them in touch with Mark. They can reach out to me directly, and I'll put them in touch with Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for the presentation. You heard the conscience of commission members, so you'll probably be hearing from at least a couple of them.
Okay, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Moving on to other business, let's go around the table, starting with Khalil.
Hey, Ray, would it be possible for me to bring up some other business from the agency's end first?
Sure.
Okay, two things. One has to do with the next meeting that Jared had noted earlier in the meeting, a possible postponement for a couple of weeks and a cancellation of the June meeting. So Jared, what is the proposed next meeting date?
I think May 27th would be the best date.
What day of the week is that?
The Thursday, sticking with the Thursday schedule.
Okay.
Later.
And that's the day prior to the holiday weekend.
Correct.
Yeah. Ray, is the commission amenable to that?
Well, let's put it out to commission members. Is everybody amenable to moving that date 2 weeks later?
Mike Peardock.
Michael.
I have a HMSAP meeting that day and that entire week.
Okay. What do you say, Jared? How about the previous week?
You go sure. I mean, that's a shorter timetable for us to put together a gear marking recommendation, but I think we can manage that.
Khalil, may I interject on that? I believe that's the day we're holding our rec panel meeting on the 20th.
Okay, good call. Jared, why don't we move it into the first week of June?
So we'd be looking at June 3rd.
Yeah.
Are there any objections to June 3rd? Okay, we'll make that change then. So there'll be one meeting again this spring on June 3rd with the May 13th and June 17th meetings being canceled.
Great. Okay, thanks, Jared. My second issue, Ray, has to do with menhaden seining on Fridays in Boston Harbor. And about 10 years ago, in response to a seiner fishing behind the line and some on the water conflicts. Director Diodati conditioned the seining permits to prevent them from fishing on Fridays in Boston Harbor, and that seemed to quiet down a lot of the noise that was generated. But in the interim, the boat that fishes in that area, not by regulation, but just because he lives down there, has developed a very good working relationship with a lot of the other users on the water. And we even got a letter from the Mass Striped Bass Association asking or endorsing on behalf of this fisherman a relaxation of that rule to allow Friday fishing in Boston Harbor. And I'm going to prepare a memo for the commission describing our intent to do that. And I'll accept any comments back to me on that issue. But it's been pointed out to us that the one seiner that's fishing down in that area is forced to steam, out of the harbor, out of the long distances, and given the much improved state of affairs in that area, we don't think it's necessary. So just want to bring that up. That's all I have, Chairman.
Thank you, Dan. So you're going to send your recommendations out to the commission for feedback. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I mean, it's right now it's a permit condition, but I respect the MFAC's role under 17A to sort of approve directors' actions on the times, the places, and the amounts of fish that may be taken. So even though it's a permit condition that I could probably lift, I'd like to get the commission's blessing on that.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any questions for Dan on this right now?
I'm not seeing any questions. In terms of timing, that fishery typically opens on June 1. So as there won't be a commission meeting between now and then, Dan, do you want them to reach out to you directly if there's any questions, comments, concerns on that?
Yes, Jared, thank you. That's a good call.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we'll continue on other business and commission member comments.
Thank you. Let's start with Khalil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as we heard from Mark earlier regarding the Fisheries Habitat Program, I just want to say that there's so much behind the scenes that is going on with DMF, and it's things that we don't usually hear about, and such as the Fisheries Habitat Program with the acidification, and I've come upon something that's really interesting. DMF is holding seminars at 11 o'clock, usually goes from 11 to 12. And during these seminars, many topics are being spoken about. For instance, this past Tuesday, I tuned in and heard about the eelgrass research that's going on. And the previous Tuesday, I heard about, and it's all on Zoom, I heard about the research that's going on with horseshoe crabs. These are just a couple of things that I've learned about over the past couple of weeks. When I was in grad school, besides my course and my research, one of the most valuable aspects of my schooling was the seminars. And so much can be gained from it. And what it does, it's highlighting all the good stuff that's going on with DMF behind the scene. And I would urge commission members, and I think maybe Director McKiernan can give us some more information as to how we can tune in or get signed on with that. But if I know that I'm retired, so I'm able to do that, and some folks are working and are not able to do it. But if you're able to do it, or if you can't tune in, I understand it's on YouTube. But there's just so much good stuff going on behind the scenes with DMF, and I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you, Khalil. I'm sure Dan can email, or his staff can email the commission members
Ray, I'll be sending out an email with a link to our YouTube channel that has all the recordings on it.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but I didn't recognize that voice.
It's Julia.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Julia.
Yep.
Suki,
All set, thanks.
Bill Doyle.
Yes, thank you, Ray. Couple of things. I'd like to hear an update on the proposed reclassification of the Plymouth, Duxbury, Kingston embayment, and also what went on at the meeting that DMF had with the FDA. And then I also have a couple of questions about implementation of the upcoming VP plan. Thank you.
So, Bill, my question, do you want to do that offline with Dan? Or how do you want to manage this?
I can address some of those now if I think we have time, Ray. Just
Okay.
as a follow-up. So thanks, Bill. I appreciate those questions. So we had a rather difficult phone call yesterday with the FDA, and Jeff and his team are continuing to develop a proposal that will take into account the performance of that plant and its ability to retain any release because of its location and because of its capabilities, with an eye toward reducing the amount of area that has to be reclassified as conditional. We're doing all that we can to make the conditional area as small as it needs to be, while we're in conformance with the model ordinance. And so,
all right, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got booted out of the meeting. I just got back in. Could you beginning?
Yeah, we met with FDA on a difficult phone call yesterday. We talked about these issues, and they're of the mind that we should reclassify right away and then come in later with any amendments. We're of the mind that we should just spend the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks to get it right, which includes defining the conditional area management area and the conditional area management plans that we're going to craft with the towns. So our goal is to make the amount of area. First of all, we've expanded the area of the that's prohibited. We've already done that. We think that FDA should be pleased with that. And then as far as the how far the conditional area has to go, in the worst case scenario, all 3 towns or practically all of it becomes conditional management, which we're trying to minimize. And so by working with our folks and the plant operator, we are trying to minimize that. So at this point, we have an impatient FDA asking us for quicker action than we were planning. And Jeff and his team are working feverishly to come up with our best proposal.
Thank you.
What was your next question? But did it have to do with the Vibrio?
Yeah, on the implementation of the Vibrio plan this year, I've been asked to make a request. A few years back, an additional icing requirement was put in place for the same embayment that we're talking about, Plymouth, Duxbury, and Kingston.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been asked to have that removed and have the icing requirements for the whole VP season be exactly the same as it is for the rest of the state.
Okay. I know that we work with DPH on the VP plan, so why don't you and I, Jeff and Eric Hickey get together on that?
Okay. Thank you.
Are you good, Bill?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Shelley Edmondson.
No comment. Just thank everyone for everything.
Lou Williams.
Yeah. I'll start right.
I didn't understand you, Lou.
I think he said he's all set.
He's all set. Thank you, Julia. Tim Brady, are you back on, or do you still have no audio? Okay, I guess Tim lost his audio. He sent a message out. Michael Piednock?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make everyone aware that I just got an email that National Marine Fisheries Service has published a 90-day petition to place shortfin mako on the threatened or endangered species list, or be subject to the Endangered Species Act. So it undergoes, that petition will undergo review, and there's comments that are due June 14, 2021. I just wanted to point that out. There's a few things going on. I've been participating in these citizen science workshops through ACCSP. I know that Matt Ayer from DMF has been on these, included in these workshops, and it's to provide a mobile apps for the recreational community and for-hire fleet to provide a mechanism to report and get good data and information concerning landings and so on. That's been ongoing. There's been a few meetings and they continue. As I noted, the last 2 weeks of May I'm filled up with between ICAT and HMSAP meetings that will take place then. And there's a continued meeting, I believe it's the last Friday of May, where the Gulf of Maine Research Institute met with all of us virtually a few months ago about bluefin tuna. That's going to continue during that meeting. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I'd like to thank the membership participation. As always, you make thoughtful comments and suggestions. I have a question for Shelley. Shelley, how are you making out with that grant proposal and the panel that was put together on the whelk research? Can you give us an update on that?
For the whelk research fleet, Ray?
Yes.
That will start in January of next year, so we haven't started that yet. But this year we're working on our SK grant, which is dealing with whelk escape vents, and we're collaborating with DMF later this month to see what kind of designs they've come up with and further test them out in the field this season, and then some alternative whelk bait, reducing horseshoe crab. So all of those are in the works for this season, but the research fleet project won't start till next year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
Dan, can you communicate to commission members about the letter you received from Dr. Sulikowski from Arizona on conch, or you think it's
sure. This was some research that was funded by the Mass Conch Association, and what they did was they sent, I don't know, I guess 150 whelks out to Arizona for Dr. Sulikowski to age them, and we finally got that back. I guess they were preliminary results. It was a little bit of a bust in that they only had 12 females, and their results weren't any different than ours. And then in a follow-up email, there was Dr. Sulikowski raised some recommendations that DMF should look into, and recommended that we delay the gauge until we resolve some of these science questions. My staff has put together a response to that. It's a memo to me, and I have shared that with the SMAST folks, because the Conch Association was very interested in bringing in some of the SMAST professors, Dr. Stokesbury and Dr. Cadron in on some of these discussions. So Ray, we've responded to them. I'm sorry, we have a response to Dr. Selikowski's recommendations. It's going to be reviewed by us working with the SMAS folks, probably later in May, because the SMAS folks are straight out with their completion of their semester. And then we'll be having a meeting with the industry after that.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. That's all I have. So I guess we're going to move to public comment. Is there
Hey,
anybody
Ray?
from the public? Yes.
Ray, can I have them a moment to speak?
Yes, by all means. I thought I called you, Billy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right, Ray. No problem. I just want to remind all the fishermen who may be listening or who we can speak to, the days are getting longer now. The weather's getting somewhat better, and we're going to be at sea a lot, and to be careful, to watch out for each other, stay on the radio, pay attention. And then also, I was listening to the radio NPR not too long ago, and I heard Shelley come on talking about a seafood program that she's promoted out on Martha's Vineyard, and it was a great report. It went national, and I think maybe Shelley should say a few words about what she's doing over there with that program. Could you do that, Shelley?
Sure, Bill. Thank you. Yeah, our group here is opening up a wholesale seafood market. The main market in Menemsha closed due to COVID and was leaving a lot of our fishermen concerned about how they were going to sell their catch. So we did a lot of fundraising this winter and are now in the process of fixing up the shack and getting everything ready to start buying seafood this spring and really creating a marketing campaign to increase local demand for all of our great seafood here in the state.
Terrific.
Thanks.
So, Shelley, my question to you, the seafood shack, are you going to be serving, fish and chips or anything out of that?
No, it'll just be a wholesale market. There are a number of retail seafood markets in the area, and so we're being careful not to compete, but directing a lot of people over to those markets. So
get some chowder over there, Ray.
Yeah, come on over.
It just gave me thought because Dan said that he's going to meet with the conch industry sometime in June after he hears back from SMAS. And I was thinking maybe we should. Well, I guess we'll still be on Zoom, right, Dan? So we can't have a formal meeting, public meeting.
Well, hard to say, Ray. Who knows? Maybe we can have a meeting that's outdoors and distanced. I mean, that's an option, but we'll see.
Yeah, because we haven't been over to the vineyard in years, so.
Yeah.
And a lot of the conch industry does fish from the vineyard, so it was just a thought. That's
Yeah.
why I asked about the fish and chips, but I'm sure Shelley can work something out where we can order food or something and have an outdoor event where we stay socially distant and whatnot. Because I, as chair, would like to see a commission meeting held over on the vineyard. I mean, we have been doing one a year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that would be wonderful, and our fishermen would greatly appreciate that. And I'm happy to coordinate that when the time is right for all. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Dan. Anything else to be said by commission members before I move to public comment? Okay, let's open it up to public comment, Jared.
If you're a member of the public and wish to address the commission, use the raise hand function. I will recognize you and provide you with speaking privileges. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised by members of the public.
Well, then I'm going to move for a motion to adjourn. Hello?
I'll second.
Somebody made the motion, Shelley seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.